This is probably the best combination of ball pocketing and spin that I've ever come across in a poly. The primary con being how it feels right off a stringer versus how it feels once you've played with it for a session or two. Diadem caught my eye when I was visiting the tennis shops in Japan on a vacation recently, and this caught me by surprise because they had a pretty strong retail presence there. That's unusual because, at least in the US and Canada where I live and play, that retail presence doesn't really seem to exist. But it's really good to see smaller brands make inroads because, as you're about to find out, they do make really good stuff. I strung this in my Bolt 98 Lite V1 at 35 pounds, which is a good time to remind you guys of my own biases, which are that over time I found low tensions to work best for me. Someday I'll make a video dedicated to explaining why that this is the case, but for now I've linked this video down in the description below for you guys to get an explainer on why that is the case. I've also linked the exact moment I talk about this so you guys don't have to go scrubbing for it. The point I'm trying to make is that everyone has such biases and you should be aware of them. So, for example, the folks over at Tennis Spin and Tennis Nerd prefer pretty stiff and controlled setups, and no matter what they recommended as comfortable, I always found to be stiff and boardy, especially for someone at my 3.5, 4.0 level, and especially for someone like me who came to tennis carrying a lot of baggage from other racket sports and having played those at a pretty decent level. The first thing you notice, especially if you string your own rackets, is just how sharp the sides on the string are. That combined with the star shape really give you what I like to call free spin, which really means that no matter how I swung the racket, I seem to get a whole lot more spin than I'm used to. Seriously, this is the most spin I've ever experienced from a string. I can't speak for Diadem, but if spin was your goal, they definitely accomplished it. That brings me to how the spin actually feels pretty controlled. Now, on sharp spin-oriented strings, I always feel that the launch angle of the ball is a fair bit higher than what I prefer, and I seem to have trouble controlling it sometimes, but that's not the case here. I felt for every kind of swing speed, whether fast or slow, I was able to direct the arc of the ball, and that's just a fantastic sensation to get from a string. The only place I found this combination of spin and control is with pretty stiff strings like Tour Bite, which tend to be a bit harsh, but this big surprise is that this was actually comfortable. Like, it's not uber soft, it's just comfortably stiff. The analogy that kept popping in my head is that if Tour Bite was like store-bought croutons that are pretty hard to bite on, Solstice Power was like a fresh baguette where the crust is super thin and crispy, but it gives way to a super soft interior. So what Solstice Power feels like is that as you strike the ball, you get pretty decent feedback, but that almost immediately gives way to a plush and comfortable experience as you follow through your swing. Folks that watch this channel regularly know that I like to maximize ball pocketing over every other trade in a string, so I was glad to find that this baguette-like quality that I've described gave really decent ball pocketing. Like, I tried to find fault with it, but I really could not. This softness I've described also gives really decent power. Like, it's controlled power that's very linear in response. So, for example, if I swung my racket 50% faster, I would see a 50% faster ball on the other end of the court. Maybe it's just me, but I really like this linear response. It just makes me feel like I have a lot more control than I would normally from a string that would not do this. The word that I associate with this kind of a linear response is clean, that this is a very clean feeling string. There's one thing that kind of muddies this clean feel, which is that this is not the crispest string. I mean, I found that this baguette-like quality that I described gave me enough feel, and I was perfectly happy with this combination of spin, power, and crispness. But if you're like my friend Kent from the channel Open Court, then this may not be crispy enough for you. At the end of the day, you're just gonna have to try it for yourself and see if we see eye to eye. This brings me to the only con I experienced with Solstice Power, which is tension maintenance. Now, I'm not uber sensitive to tension loss, but even I noticed a drop in tension after my first session. This seems to be a common sentiment among the limited reviews I found online, so I think I'm not alone in experiencing this. My solution to this would be to string this at a higher tension, so when the string does soften and open up, it lands at your desired tension. Now, this is normally not something I like to recommend, but because the string was so linear in response, I think this might be an exception. The best comparison I have to this is YTAC's Quadra Twist, which is one of my favorite strings of all time, but this is stiffer and livelier by at least 30%. For me, who prefers a soft feel, this is still just a little bit too stiff. There is another version of the string called Solstice Black, which I may end up trying and may end up being in my wheelhouse. So let me know down in the comments below if you want to see a follow-up to this video. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in recommending this to anyone who wants a less harsh tour bite, assuming you can figure out how to work with the tension loss. I have a lot of interesting string experiments coming up, so yeah, subscribe for more racket sports related content, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, I'm hungry. Let's go have food.